everybody, and welcome back. I am Paul Thurrott. I'm here once again with my wife, Stephanie. And today we'd like to discuss why we chose Mexico. And this is a really complex topic, right? There's a lot that goes into it. And some of it's specific to us. I mean, I think one of the things we need to explain up front is we're not retiring to Mexico, right? I mean, you and I don't have to explain this to you, but for everyone listening or watching, you and I have worked from home for decades. I've been working from home since the mid-90s, almost 30 years. And we've often talked about splitting our time between two different places. We also spent 15 plus years traveling to Europe every summer, and I think during that time frame, we probably spent at least a month in Europe every year. Mm-hmm. We've probably spent about 2 years of our life in Europe altogether, 1 year of that probably in France. And, that was where our heads were at. We didn't really have a plan for this. You're right.
Right. It was too far down the road to have a plan.
Yeah, we had to wait for the kids to grow up and move out. And, we wanted to downsize and, life took us in whatever direction it took. COVID happened. We ended up visiting Mexico. We've had this discussion about how I came to you and said, hey, this is going to sound crazy, but we should look at Mexico. Mm-hmm. So obviously we've chosen Mexico. And we've chosen it in the sense that we would like to split our time between the United States and Mexico.
Yes.
Doesn't mean we're not going to go to Europe again, but it does mean that for the short term, for sure, because of, we need to focus on the place we have, and we don't have infinite money,
or infinite time,
yeah, so we're going to do that. So and just to, one of the interesting things just in general, and we'll kind of get to this as we go down the list, is when we think about the particulars of spending time in Europe, some of the issues don't exist in Mexico. You have to fly overnight, which is arduous, especially as you get older. It's a very expensive place. It's more expensive than the United States. The weather isn't ideal. I mean, one of the things I always had in my head was I wanted to get away from the winters of New England when we lived in Boston, or here, which is almost the same. But the weather there is lousy when it's here, so.
Yeah, it doesn't offset itself.
Yeah. So we never, like I said, we never thought that through. So when you think about this kind of decision with Mexico, it's not one thing. It's not Mexico ticked one box, we're done, we're going to Mexico, mm-hmm. right? So we came up with a list of 10 things. We'll kind of go through this quickly today. I think we'll expand on some of these in the future, because some of these really need to be expanded on. Some of these need more information mm-hmm. than we're going to be able to provide today. And I think the first one in the list, number one, falls into that category, right? And,
yes.
and we have to be completely honest. The number one factor, it's not enough by itself, but the number one factor is absolutely the cost of living, or the affordability of Mexico compared to the United States, compared to Europe or anywhere else we might mm-hmm. want to go.
Right. Yep. Yeah. It's just so much more affordable. Housing is affordable, mm-hmm. which, we learned when we, buying a place. Right. Food is less expensive. Transportation is less expensive. Ubers, mm-hmm. The subway, pretty much anything you need, utilities for the place we're staying, everything is, it's less money, and
right.
that informs so many of the other things. So like you said, it's not the only thing on the list, but it plays into a lot of the other factors on the list, for sure.
Maybe we should give three quick examples, because you mentioned all three of these actually. So food, for example, you and I have particular restaurants that we like in our area here in Pennsylvania. And if we go out to eat at one of those restaurants and we get a couple of drinks, we get an appetizer, we get a couple of meals, with tip, especially since the pandemic, because you tend to tip a little bit better because of the awfulness that just happened. We don't really get out of one of these places for less than $150, mm-hmm. right? The comparable place that we go to near our apartment in Mexico City, and literally it's a 5-minute walk from our apartment, that same experience is $40. It's, it's incredible.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. It's not 10% cheaper.
No, it's not 10%. It's, it's almost a third. Mm-hmm. And when I say it's the equivalent experience, I'm actually downplaying it a little bit, because we get to eat outside, right? 24/7. Well, not, 365 days a year. Mm-hmm. You can eat outside here at one of those places actually both the places I'm thinking of. But, only during the summer months, right? So
Right.
big difference there. The subway, 25 cents.
Hmm.
Anywhere you want to go in the city. I don't know the particulars of every subway system in the world, but I know from traveling to places like London and Paris or Barcelona, or just living in Boston, which has an extensive subway system. Those things are A, much more expensive, and B, can get much more expensive depending on distance. They'll have
Yes.
zones,
Hmm.
right? That does not
Right.
exist in Mexico City,
Hmm.
which is bigger than every city in the Americas, except for one. And it's 25 cents, period,
Hmm.
right? And then I think the Uber one is another interesting thing. We had an interesting little wake up call. We had some US based travel had to use Uber, which we don't typically do unless we're traveling. In Mexico City, I bet our average price for an Uber is roughly $4. Does that sound
Yeah.
accurate?
Hmm. Yep.
I mean, I don't. What was it in Seattle? $28 or
Oh
something.
yeah. And then the one from the airport, which is
Yeah,
not that it's about the same distance from the Mexico City airport to our
that's right.
apartment as it was from Seattle. I think that was 75 or $80, I think.
Yep. So there you go. That's not. And again, it's not 10% less expensive. It's significantly less expensive.
Hmm.
So we'll talk more about affordability in the future. So number two on the list is climate. And granted, we do live in the Northeast United States where it's a little extreme, right? But
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So, like you were saying, to get out of here in the winters, or frankly, even sometimes in the summer. I mean, it's
mhm,
90 degrees plus for a good chunk of July and August. And,
right,
that's something you want to break from sometimes too. To leave here when the weather isn't ideal to go to Europe, you're going to a place where the weather is comparable. Yeah, it's a little cooler, it's a little warmer, but it's not really a break from the climate you're living in.
right,
To go to Mexico City, you're in a climate that's pretty much, you know, mid 70s to low 80s for highs and in the 50s for lows, more or less year round, with
right.
a rainy season that to us coming from the Northeast is not an
Not particularly
unreasonable
rainy.
amount of
Yeah,
rain.
right, right.
It's a late afternoon or evening thunderstorm half
Yep,
of half of this time, not every day, but half
yeah.
days.
Really, what we have here in the Northeast United States, what you would have in Europe, what you would have in most of the United States, is really extreme weather. It's an extreme summer and it's an extreme winter. And
Hmm.
then you have those shoulder seasons where it's just kind of messy and it can be nice, or not.
Yeah.
But
Hmm.
we looked up some charts last night of climates, and I think it was Boston, Paris, I don't remember where else,
Barcelona.
Barcelona, and then Mexico City. All of them except for Mexico City had this kind of a bell curve of a sort. Mexico City was like this flat line. It varies very little month to month. The weather in August versus the weather in January is very similar.
Hmm.
That is not the case anywhere else that we would consider living, certainly.
Right.
So that was very interesting.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
So number three is food and drink. And this is a big deal. I think you and I, in a moment of maturity some years ago, decided or just kind of came out and said it. Food and drink is 70% of travel. The reason to
Hmm.
go to a different place, right? To experience
Yep.
that kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's a big part of travel for us. And it doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be expensive, but it has to be interesting
Hmm.
and tasty and, somewhat unique. And we discovered early on that Mexican food in Mexico is a lot more diverse than a Mexican food that we have here in the
Right.
US, which is pretty much, hard shell tacos and burritos and,
And
chimichangas and things
other
like
things
that.
you cannot find in Mexico to save your life. Yeah,
Yep.
Mexican food, real Mexican food, has as little to do with Mexican food in the United States as real Chinese food does to Chinese food in the United States.
Hmm.
It is that thing in name only. It is a wake up call to go there and see how good and, like you said, how diverse the food is. And
Hmm.
in Mexico City in particular, you have such a wide variety of things. It's not like you have to have Mexican food every single meal. You could have the best sushi you've ever had one night if you want, or Indian
Hmm.
food, or whatever it
Yeah.
is. It's a
Yes.
cosmopolitan city and an incredible diverse range of
Hmm.
food there. So
Right. Yep.
yeah,
And
pretty
drinks.
incredible.
I think we
And
shouldn't
drinks.
leave the drinks. I mean,
Yep.
I like to make cocktails. I'm interested in trying interesting
Hmm.
cocktails. There are places there that have fantastic cocktails, and there are some of the best rated cocktail bars in the world in
That's
Mexico
right.
City.
Right. Yep. So number four is variety, and here we're kind of talking about geography and places to explore, right? So this is like all of these things. It's Mexico, the country, but also Mexico City, the place where we're going to be most of the time. So Mexico City as an ideal base to kind of see that variety,
Hmm.
but just the sheer amount of different places to explore, things that are new to us, right? I think that's kind of a big deal
Hmm. Yeah,
as
it's a
well,
city.
right?
There's lots of stuff. I think we could probably walk to a different restaurant from our apartment
Hmm.
every night for a year and not go to the same place twice,
That's
you know.
incredible. Yeah. No, I mean,
Yeah.
and no, that's
Yeah.
accurate. That's not an exaggeration. It's
No,
incredible.
right. Hmm.
It is incredible to me that within, we just talked about food and drink, but for 5 to 10 minutes from our house, some of the best restaurants I've ever been in my life are there.
Right.
But
Yeah.
also, this is a city that has more museums than Paris or London, right?
Hmm.
It
Yep.
has incredible parks and cultural sites and events, and it
Hmm.
has this diverse range of geographies from rainforest to arid desert areas to mountains and beaches, and it's just this
Hmm.
big diverse country. And as a hub, Mexico City is really kind of an ideal place
Hmm.
to be and
And
then to go see that stuff.
right. And it ties into the affordability again because you can get, an inexpensive bus to, I think we took a bus to Puebla and it
Hmm.
was $25 a piece round trip to go to Puebla.
Right. And to be
So
to be clear, not a school bus. It was a
no,
a
no.
nice bus with power,
Yep.
and
Hmm.
it
Yeah. So
was
you can explore this country
mhm.
without spending a lot of money.
Right. And this is how, again, these things all kind of tie into each other. It's
Hmm.
not just variety, but variety with affordability.
Hmm.
Very interesting.
Yep.
So number five is history and culture, which I just referenced. But I think one of the things that really hit me when we first went to Mexico City last summer was the center of this place is as nice as anything you would see in Paris or London or name your favorite city, New York City, whatever it is. And I think that's something a lot of people don't understand who haven't visited there.
Right.
It's
Hmm.
and there's also this kind of rich history that I didn't know anything about that I'm embarrassed to
Yeah.
say.
Right. Hmm.
There's a lot to learn,
Right. There's all the pre-colonial history.
right?
I mean, those amazing pyramids that some of the pyramids are right outside the city. We've seen them
Right.
both from balloon rides and from the ground.
Hmm.
You know, the museums, large and small. There's just so much that you can explore.
Yeah, we grew up in New England, like I said, and for us growing up, the American history started with Plymouth Rock,
The
right?
pilgrims, like,
Yeah, and it didn't. And
right.
there's this whole other thing that happened, and there was a thing that was happening before people came from Europe, and I'm looking forward to exploring that part of it too. So
Hmm.
that's really exciting.
Hmm.
So number six, I have listed as language, although I think of this also as that kind of level of difficulty thing, right? One of the things that makes travel interesting is that it forces you to try. It's not easy.
Right. Yes.
If it was
Hmm.
just the same as where we live, why
Why go?
bother, right? So it's kind of a nice level of difficulty, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Yep. Yeah, I feel like I'm making progress. I feel like I have a long way to go. I've
Sure.
been, you know, obviously life takes you in a certain path. And had I known life was taking me in this path, I could have spent a lot more time
Sure.
studying Spanish instead of French for, you know, through high school and college. But here we are. So,
Well, you should mention what it is you're doing because you're doing more work than I am with
yeah.
regards to
So
learning Spanish.
the big thing that I'm doing is I'm taking lessons online with a teacher through a program called italki, which is it's almost like an Airbnb for language learning. You sign up and you look at little videos of the different teachers, and if you find one that you think looks like a good match for you, you can book a trial lesson for they're marked down. I can't remember
Hmm.
the price, but they're inexpensive. And then um, I try to do when we're not traveling or she's not traveling, I try to do 2 lessons a week
Right.
online. And I think that makes a big difference because it's one thing to memorize a bunch of flashcards and have all the time in the world to think of what the word is. But when you're in a conversation, you need the words to come
Right.
quickly and fluently. And
Yep.
I find, you simple words that like carne, I can't come up with sometimes when it's the flow of conversation because, it's
Hmm.
more stressful, but it's good. My Spanish is getting better from that and from visiting Mexico City. That's making a difference too.
Right. Right. Yeah. Look, if you're just going to visit Mexico City, you could get away with not knowing Spanish. If you seriously want to spend time there, you need to learn Spanish. It's just
Hmm.
no way around it. We've already experienced this with people coming to our home for deliveries or, people who are providing some sort of a service, whatever it is. You need to learn the language. So we're going to go down that path, and you're doing a much better job at that than I am, although I'll try to catch up eventually, I
I'm
promise.
sure you'll catch right up.
I'm just latch onto you. Stephanie, what did you say? Um, so number 7 is accessibility. And what I mean by that is that unlike Europe, and this is coming from the East Coast of the United States in particular, Mexico City is a short nonstop flight, meaning 4 to 4.5, maybe 5 hours, depending, from where we live. There's only one time zone change, which is so critical. And we don't have to fly overnight.
Hmm.
It's really hard to express how big of a deal that is, especially as we get older,
Hmm.
Whether that flight,
Yeah.
sorry.
No, I was going to say the first that really hit me. I hadn't given that much thought to that. And I
Hmm.
probably on one of our first trips there, we took a 8 a.m. flight out from Newark. So we probably landed, by 1 at the
Hmm.
latest. And then we were out of the airport by 2. We were at an Airbnb by 2:30. And you could drop your stuff and just we
Yeah,
were like, okay, let's go. You're ready to go. It's not, you don't feel like you have to sleep and force
right.
yourself to stay awake until a certain time because you want to adjust to a 5 or 6 hour time change. I mean,
Yeah,
you're just there. 1 hour is not really a difference at all.
it's incredible. We just did a flight to Seattle. That's a 6 hour flight, by the way. So it's a third again as long as flying to Mexico City. 3 time zones, right? We eventually made it 4 by going to Alaska. But when you fly to Europe, you have to fly overnight for the most part. And it's brutal. It's just a
Hmm.
brutal trip. And I don't know, maybe everyone's a little different, but I'm almost wasted for a week from that kind of thing. Whereas you go to Mexico and you're like, okay, let's go. It's just fine.
Hmm.
It, it's incredible that you can have that kind of an international destination be that accessible to me.
Hmm.
I think
Right.
that's incredible.
Without the long flight and the jet lag.
Yeah. Yep. Number 8 is safety, and this one is a pet peeve of ours because I got to tell you, the one thing we've heard again and again and again and again and again and again from people is, yeah, yeah, no, it sounds great, but is it safe? Is it safe, Stephanie? Is it safe? Really?
I mean, I feel safe there.
Yeah.
I feel like, with the caveat that any big city has areas that you want to spend time in and that you
Hmm.
feel comfortable in, and there are areas that you probably don't want to go in. Um, but the areas that you don't want to go in don't have things that are appealing to you either. There
Right.
are parts
Right.
of Philadelphia or New York or Baltimore that
Hmm.
I would not want to go to, or that perhaps are not safe. And there are parts of Mexico City that aren't safe. There also are not going to be museums and restaurants
Right.
and nice parks in those areas that I want to visit. I think in any big city, you want to be cognizant of, where's your purse, where's your phone,
Right.
where's your backpack. Um, but I feel like that's no different in Mexico City than anywhere else. I mean, I went out there in June. It was just Kelly and me, so 2 women traveling
Hmm.
alone, and we felt safe. We didn't
Constantly
worry about.
harassed on the streets of Roma Norte. Was that what it was like?
I did get to ride in the women and children only train cars, which
Okay.
is
Nice. All right.
a nice little treat. But
Sure.
you know,
I mean, I've had a phone stolen from me in Lisbon. I was pickpocketed in Rome. We were absolutely going to be robbed on the subway in Paris at one time, and I kind of shooed the guy away. Um, we we haven't spent as much time in Mexico City. I mean, and it is like big city, like you said, anything could happen. But the only story I have that's anything like those stories is that I lost my phone in the IKEA that day, and I was convinced I'd been pickpocketed and blamed myself wearing loose shorts like an idiot, just walking around not paying attention. And I was an idiot, but no one had pickpocketed me. It had just fallen out of my pocket onto a couch that I'd sat on. In fact, it was probably the couch we eventually bought. And we decided to call the phone, and what we eventually found out was that someone had found the phone and returned it to customer service so it could get back to me. So slightly different experience,
Hmm.
than we've had in Europe with that kind of thing. So,
Right.
just an idea. And like she said, different areas, different situations, but Roma Norte, where we live, and the surrounding area is incredibly safe. And we walk there at night and we think nothing of it. And you
Hmm.
did with Kelly, like you said.
Hmm.
It's,
Yeah.
it's incredibly safe.
Hmm.
So number 9 is visitors, and this is in the sense that this is a place people are going to want to come see us at, which is kind of fun too, right? I mean,
Hmm. Yep. Yeah, friends and family, hear that you're spending time in Mexico City, and
hmm
their question is, when can we come?
yeah,
Which is
yeah.
nice.
We haven't gotten a lot of that in Pennsylvania. you know,
No, no.
um, and people
Everybody
have
who has
come.
come to visit us here is at the top of the list for
Yes,
people who
yeah,
need
that's how
to
we're
come
doing
to
it
Mexico
exactly. So
City.
this was a
So,
test. So now
yeah.
that there's a more desirable locale, we'll see who our friends
Yeah.
really are. Um, so that's kind of interesting. But yeah, this for all the reasons we just stated. I mean, there's so much to do and see in
Hmm.
Mexico City, and people are going to love it. And I'm looking forward not just to hosting people when we're there, but also
Hmm.
just friends of ours and family. Just they can just go there on their own too.
Right.
It's a free
Yep.
place to stay, so
Hmm. Right.
it's nice.
A great place for
Hmm
every reason that's on this list for us
That's
is a
right.
reason for our friends and family to come there too.
Yes. And the last item on the list, and this is last but not least. I mean, in fact, I think this is one of the most striking things about this city and this country is the people. Um, Mexico, in our experience, has some of the nicest people on the planet,
Hmm.
and it is it's notable and it is immediately noticeable,
Hmm.
right?
I mean, I think our first and best example of this is the first time when we
Hmm
arrived and we landed at the airport, and we thought, well, we're savvy travelers. We'll just take the subway. It's easy enough to take the subway to
Yeah,
the
that
hotel that we're going
was.
to go stay at.
Don't ever do that.
And
By the way,
as it
don't
turns
don't
out,
ever do that.
the subway, while it does only cost 25 cents, does often have a fair number of stairs and
Yep.
not necessarily have escalators or elevators. And to climb up and down these stairs with your luggage is kind of a hassle. But during this process, we had at least half a dozen people, like
hmm
unprompted, approach us because we were looking at our phones or looking at signs. And, even if they didn't speak English, try to
Yeah.
communicate and say, where do you have to get to? We had people sitting on the subway who explained to us where to get off.
hmm
And then we realized we wanted to get off 2 stops later for our own
We had
reason.
given them the wrong information. They
Right.
told us exactly the right time to get off, and then in talking about it, we said, "Oh wait, actually, I think we had to go 2 more stops."
Right. And they made sure they said, this is the stop. You need to get off here.
Yeah,
And we said, no, it's okay. It's okay. We figured it
yeah,
out. But they were, I mean, not only
super
gave us
nice.
directions, but like watched out for us to make sure
hmm
that we got where we needed to go. It was really
Incredible.
nice.
It's
Yeah.
just incredible. And the other thing I would just mention is many, many times in Ubers, especially, people will say, how do you like it here? I love it. We love it here. What do you like about it? We'll have these
Hmm.
conversations. And I remember one guy, I think you were in the car, he said, what do you like about it? And I said, la gente, la historica, the la cultura. And he was so happy
Hmm.
that it was not
Yeah.
just, it was like, oh, I like the bars and the,
Right.
restaurants and stuff, which I do, but there's so much to it. And
Hmm.
we've had people showing us photos of their families and places to
Hmm.
go. And it's
The
just,
towns, cities and towns they're from.
yep, it's just incredible, and we've had good experiences all over Europe. We have, a
Yes,
lot of,
people are generally nice. It's not like people are jerks in other places, but people in
but we
Mexico
also,
are very
have
nice.
stories about people in, Paris or wherever also not being nice, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
I don't think we have a single story. I don't think we've witnessed
No.
anything bad.
Mm-mm.
We've just seen nice people. I mean, it's
Hmm.
crazy how nice they are. They're too
Yep.
nice. It's suspicious. So I think that's 10.
We'll even that out.
Well, yeah, we'll balance that one. Mexico and Mexico City are not perfect, right? So there are downsides to these places, and we'll look at that in the future. And I think we're going to go through some of these, especially. I think the affordability stuff is interesting to look at, and the climate maybe. And as time goes on, I have no doubt we're going to discuss some of the restaurants and bars that we like, especially, and the ones that are close to us too, most especially. So we'll do some of that in the future. But I just wanted to get through something because we get this question so much. Like, yeah, I know the pictures look great, but what are you doing?
Right.
Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
And so I think it was important for us just to kind of lay it out. These are the reasons. It's not any one of these things. It's the combination of these things and how these things are not always available in places that we do love otherwise, like Paris or Barcelona. Those places are not affordable. The climate is not great. There's extreme weather. The language barrier can be a little bit higher. And the accessibility thing with that overnight flight, and for Barcelona, it might be a 2-leg flight. And frankly, the safety thing, although I don't worry so much about safety as a man and a man of my size, for sure. But, there's all these things that go into this decision-making process. And as much as we love some places, when you kind of do the math, and I don't just mean math on affordability, but when you kind of add up all these factors, Mexico City becomes kind of a no-brainer for us.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
maybe
it was
for other
really
people.
surprising.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Year and a half ago,
Right.
this was not on the list.
Right. Yeah.
And now it's really kind of all we're focused on. So a lot has
Right.
changed.
Yeah. And it's
Well,
not the right place for everyone, but I feel
Nope.
like there are other people out there who are like we were a year and a half ago with little to no information about this except what you get from
Right.
pop culture in the media in the US. So
Sure.
hopefully this,
Yeah, it's not like
it's right for
Narcos.
some other people too. No,
It's a
not
good
like-
TV show. I recommend
like
watching
Ozark.
it. Yeah, it's not like those things. It's quite a different place. So
Yeah.
hopefully between this and whatever we do in the future, we can change some minds. But that's where we're at. So thank you for watching,
Thank you.
and we'll be back soon.